All right, so it is November 4, 2018. This is Member Discord Call Open House, episode number 8. And on today's call, we're going to be talking about truth in the movies and lies in the news. What are the movies that seem to have the most truth? Why were they made? What was the purpose? We will be discussing that. Programming of the masses. That's probably a nice little segue, isn't it? The masses seem to be programmed. Why is it happening? What's the end game? We'll be discussing that. And black pills. In the pre-call, somebody suggested that we talk about black pills. It wasn't my idea, but I'm just the host. So today we're going to be talking about black pills. So listen if you dare. But before we talk about any of that, we've got two newbies joining us on the call today. And it's been a few weeks since we were last joined by newbies. So today we're going to introduce them to the website and learn more about the kinds of people who've made their way here to johnlebon.com. So it promises to be a fun call. Let's get straight into it. Let's go to Mezzy in Victoria. Mezzy, good to have you back on the call. And you've got through the 33rd call from last week, and I thought it went really well. What say you?
Oh, yeah, I loved it. I thoroughly enjoyed the call.
Excellent. Yeah, I thought part 2 was terrific. And I think that call is up to about 15 or 20 comments. So we got some good feedback to that call, I thought.
Yeah, sorry. I was just typing. We did, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. I thought we did. So Mezzy, good to have you back. Call 34, and we've got two newbies with us today, Mezzy. So why don't we say a quick hello to them, then we'll do the trivia, and then we'll do our usual Ask the Newbies a Question segment. So first of all, let's head out to somewhere in North America. We've got with us JJ for the first time here at johnlebon.com. JJ, take yourself off mute and say hello.
Hello.
That was straight to the point. So can you tell us a little bit about which part of North America you're coming to us from?
Yeah, I'm from the Midwest, Iowa in particular.
Another member from the Midwest. This is fantastic. And what we're going to do is, once we get through the trivia, we'll give you a chance to tell us more about yourself. I'm looking forward to that. And we've also got, for the first time, somebody coming to us from Great Britain. So take no notice, take yourself off mute and say hello. Or leave yourself on mute. That can also work sometimes.
Hello, guys. Sorry about that.
It's good to have you on board. And which part of Britain are you coming to us from?
I'm coming from the Midlands, in the UK, so just north of Birmingham.
Excellent. Well, we don't have many Europeans join us on these calls because it is a little bit late in your part of the world when we record. So thank you for sticking with us. And in a few moments, we'll do our Ask a Noob a Question segment. So make sure you're ready for that. But before we get into all of that, it's time for the John Le Bon Member Discord Call Trivia. So let's test those buzzers. Mezzy, test your buzzer. Alrighty, let's go to JJ, one of our newbies on the call. Test that buzzer.
Is there a button for that?
Nope, you just either make a sound with... All right, we've got another profit kind of buzzer going on. Fantastic. And take no notice. Test that buzzer. Background noise for a buzzer. I like it. Novel idea.
It was actually a T-Rex. I don't know if you got that.
No, let's try and test that buzzer one more time. Background T-Rex noise buzzer. All right.
Oh dear. It looks like Buzz.
All right, Buzz. I think we've got it sorted out. So, guys, I've got 6 questions here, and the defending champion Fung is not here to defend his crown. So there will be a new champion of the Member Discord Call Trivia in about 5 minutes. Let's find out who that's going to be. Question number 1. The concept or practice of arranging a claim into premises and conclusions can be described as... Take no notice from the Midlands of Britain.
Can you repeat the question, sorry?
No, I can't.
Ah!
So the concept or practice of arranging a claim into premises and conclusions can be described as... Mezzy from Victoria.
Standard form argument.
Standard form argument. Very good. Mezzy's on the board. 1 point. Question number 2. The method allegedly used to determine the mass of the Earth in the late 1700s is known as
Bzz.
Buzz.
JJ from the Midwest of the US, apparently.
The Cavendish experiment.
The Cavendish experiment. Yeah, when did you first hear about that?
From you, actually.
Yeah, how long ago? Do you remember?
It would have been probably less than a week ago. I would say probably 5 days ago.
Wow, so this is all still pretty new to you then.
It is, yes.
So what do you think about this idea? Let's just say that what I'm saying is true, and this actually is their story. What do you think about the idea that somebody could determine the mass of the Earth and the Moon and Mars and all these other things in the sky with heavy balls in a shed 200 years ago? What do you, just on the surface of it, what do you think of that story?
It sounds really speculative and just ridiculous overall, honestly. Just the fact that he needed to do it with a telescope from a different building and that he built a shed in order to do this that no one else seems to have been willing to recreate or is seeming to be able to recreate. It just seems impossible from the get-go.
It seems a little bit strange, doesn't it? So maybe we'll talk about the old Cavendish experiment later in the call. But yes, JJ's on the board. Fantastic. Let's go to question 3. According to official history, construction of the Pentagon began in 1941. The first soil was turned on what date? Mezzy from Victoria.
September the 11th?
September the 11th, Mezzy. What are the odds of that?
Just a coincidence, John.
Just a coincidence, yeah. When they were first constructing the Pentagon, according to official history, they did it in 1941, and the first soil, the ceremonial beginning of the construction, on September 11. Wow. Must just be a coincidence. So Mezzy's on the board. That's another point for you, Mezzy. 2 to you. JJ is on 1. Let's go to question 4. According to official history, there was once a great repository of human wisdom in the long, long ago that disappeared and may even have been burned down.
Buzz.
Mezzy from Victoria.
The Library of Alexandria.
The Library of Alexandria. Tell us a little bit about this great library, Mezzy. What happened to it? What happened to this great repository of human wisdom?
Well, it got burnt down 2,000, 3,000 years ago. I don't know. A long, long time ago. It was, yes, it had everything. All the knowledge was collected there from all around the world, I believe. And, it got burnt down.
Well, terrible. Terrible stuff. Yeah, apparently it set back humanity. It set back the intellectual pursuits of humans. Set us back hundreds, maybe thousands of years, Mezzy.
Oh, yeah. Of course it did, yeah.
Well, that's what Carl Sagan told me. And Carl Sagan wouldn't make this stuff up, would he? I mean, you can trust Carl Sagan.
Yeah?
If you can't trust Carl Sagan on a TV show called Cosmos, then who can you trust?
Well, nobody. If you can't trust Carl Sagan, you can't trust anyone.
Exactly.
Definitely Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Maybe we can trust old Neil deGrasse Tyson. Yeah. So, I actually went and saw him. He was in Brisbane last year, and he did a tour of Australia. And when he was in Brisbane, the venue where he gave his sermon, because that's what it is, it's a sermon, it was an open venue. It's kind of hard to describe, like an amphitheatre with no real walls. So people were paying $100 to go and see, literally $100 to go and see Neil deGrasse Tyson. But I could just sit there and watch him and listen for free, which is what I did. And I'm telling you, it's a sermon, straight up. I've got a video about it on johnthebond.com. We'll talk about that in a moment. So Mezzy's on 3, and we've got JJ on 1. Take No Gnosis is still not on the board. 2 questions left to try and rectify that. According to some synchromystics, a deity may have been summoned by online occultists in 2000. Take No Gnosis.
This has got to be the frog god.
And beginning with K, what's his name?
Keck.
There we go, on the board. Don't take this the wrong way, but I'm glad you got yourself on the board because it might have been a little bit embarrassing if you had have gone through this. Alrighty, so we've got 1 question left. Looks like Mezzy's going to win, but let's get through the last question then. In fact, Mezzy might not win because this is a 2-point question, but you have to get the whole lot correct. So hear me out. Question 6, 4 flights on 9/11. Take no notice.
We just know you're going to do this one. So it's 175 and 11, which hits the New York, the towers in New York. And then you have Flight 77 into the Pentagon and Flight 93 into the field. There you go.
Wow, talk about a comeback. He's come from nowhere, Mezzy. You were home and hosed. You were galloping down the home straight and you were just loving life. And out of nowhere, Take No Notice has just come up the wing and it's a dead heat on 3 points each after 6 questions. So I'm going to have to make up a question on the spot. Sadly, JJ, you didn't make it to the final round. This is just for Mezzy and for Take No Notice. So let me go to a tiebreaker question. First one to buzz in and get the question right will be the winner. In late 2012, there was a horrible, horrible tragedy where some boogeyman killed a whole bunch of kids. Can you name the boogeyman? Let the record show there were no answers. Can you name the tragedy where the boogeyman did his evil deeds? Final hint, this great tragedy would be the start of several baby hoaxes that some people believe might have all been connected via the Joker.
Boys,
Take no notice.
We're not talking about Sandy Hook, are we?
Sandy Hook. Wow, how about that? I really thought that you were, especially for a Brit, not very good at the trivia. But you've just come out of nowhere and won the JLB Member Discord Trivia. Congratulations. How do you feel?
That's great. I didn't think I was going to have a hope in hell.
That's how it looked a few minutes ago. But you've come back. You've done a great job. So what we normally do is we get the winner to decide what's going to be the first topic to discuss. And we've got 3 topics to discuss today. So you get to choose when we get to the first topic, which will be the first topic. You've got 3 to choose from: truth in the movies or lies in the news, the programming of the masses, or black pills. So what's going to be our first topic on the call today?
I would like to go for Mezzy's black pills.
Black pills. Okay, well, if that's what the winner wants, that's what the winner's going to get. So that's what we will do. We'll be talking about black pills in a moment. But before we do that, we have to do our usual Ask the Noob a Question segment. And since you've got yourself off mute already, take no notice. We'll begin with you and then we'll chat with JJ in a moment. So here's how this segment works. You get a few minutes just to introduce yourself at your first call. And take a few minutes. Take as much time as you want. Tell us, how did you first get into so-called conspiracy culture? How did you find johnthebond.com? What are some of your favourite topics? Maybe what are some of your experiences with all of this? Take as much time as you want. Give us a bit of a background as to who you are. And then once you've done that, we'll go around the panel and ask you some questions. And I'll put myself on mute and the floor is now yours.
Okay, my first dip into what you call the conspiracy realm was probably with David Icke back in around 2006. But prior to that, I would say that I've always been quite an open person and always questioning. Always thought that maybe things weren't quite right with the world. But going back to David Icke read every book prolifically and ended up not quite understanding exactly what he was really getting at and totally befuddled, to be honest, because a lot of what he was saying was true or seemed to be true if you had a look through his information and his sources, but then there was an awful lot of rubbish in there as well. So then I proceeded to carry on looking into NASA things because I was called a NASA fanboy, and I was actually one of these people who very stupidly used to look at photographs supposedly taken on Mars and look for all these little things that pop up there, like Coke cans and lemmings and things like this. And obviously we're looking for Martian pyramids and what have you. But then in 2012 I discovered that the moon landings were a hoax, and did a lot of work looking through that lot on a website called allits.com, which apparently has a lot of PhDs breaking the the information down, and completely blew my mind. And then I turned back to looking at some of the NASA stuff again, thinking, well, obviously this Martian stuff's actually on Earth, isn't it? Which, when I think about it now, I just cannot get my head around why I ever thought that it was, real. So, and fast forward into the future a bit more. 2015 was a bit of a wake-up call for me. I seem to have had a number of shocks, one of them being obviously the flat Earth thing, and also I went vegetarian, looked into the eating of meat and things like this, and that really, I don't know whether there's a connection, but I seem to have opened up more than ever when I started eating a bit healthier, should we say. And ultimately that's led me to JLB's website, where I was instantly taken with JLB on one of his all skeptic discussions, and that led me on to the higher side chapter as well, and also onto more importantly the history hoax stuff, which I immediately took on board because I was already aware that Egypt was a bit of a fake thing, as I'd spotted years ago, to be honest. That I must say that I worked in the paint industry many years ago, and I couldn't believe that the paints that they have in the temples could actually last 3,000 to 4,000 years. As if you take the most basic car today, they only guarantee it for about 7 years, and not much beyond that. And apparently these Egyptians had amazing paint jobs. So what I did was actually look into the Vikings myself, and wow, it's an eye opener. I managed to track the religious part of the Viking history, as it were, to the late 1790s, and one document in particular, which was written in Latin. So, and it doesn't seem to go back any further than that. So that's really how I ended up here. So that's me. Thank you.
Well, that is a terrific introduction. So you started off with David Icke and this kind of thing. You read a lot of his books, and then you progressed towards the moon landings. You worked out that they were a hoax. Then vegetarianism, you gave that a try. Are you still a vegetarian to this day, or was it just a phase?
No, I'm still a vegetarian to this day. I do actually try as much as I can to actually eat vegan as well, if possible. But it's not always possible. So I do no meat for over 3 years now. So it's I feel good as well. Feel good.
It amazed me when I first tried to be a vegetarian that I felt fantastic. Not just physically, but mentally as well. It was like almost like a fog had been lifted. Do you know what I mean? Which, like, I was raised to believe you have to eat meat or your body can't even build muscle, right? And then I gave vegetarianism a try for a pretty long time there, and I felt fantastic. So we'll talk about that later on. The history hoax. And you're telling us that you took a trip to Tucson. You took a trip to Tucson via the Vikings, and when you got to Tucson, 1790s is as far back as you could find history for the Vikings.
Well, for the religious, so the Odin worship and all that kind of side of the story, for sure, it goes back to 1795. I'm still looking through the Viking raids and things like this, but it's essentially, even the Viking raids, they go back to a document which is a Roman document, and essentially doesn't mention the Vikings at all. It mentions the German people, and interestingly enough as well, there's a lot of commentary going through this Viking history where they're actually saying, well, actually it wasn't the Vikings that were raiding, it was the Franks. So take or make what you will of that. It's all rather interesting, to be honest. But yes, certainly the actual documents going back seems to track to 1795 and no later. And everything really that they base anything modern on now goes to that, and things that have commentary, essentially, on that original document.
And this would be so difficult for someone to believe if this was their first exposure to this idea that whether it's the Vikings or the ancient Chinese or ancient Egypt or any of these things, the idea that the sources only go back 200 years, their natural response, and this would have been me a few years ago as well, is, no, that can't be right. You're not looking properly. On the contrary, once you start looking properly, you'll see this time and time again. The 1700s, for some reason. The 1700s. It all seems to stop. Now, why might that be? Take no notice. Why might it be the case that the tiny percentage of us who ever bother to look at the sources all seem to come to the same conclusion that they don't go back more than a couple hundred? Why could that possibly be, do you think?
Well, there's even more evidence than just the sources going back, because I said I'd already looked at Egypt, but the other thing that's been on my mind for a good while is that you look at things like trees and stuff like this. They don't tend to be many trees around that are more than 100. Sometimes maybe 150 years old. Well, certainly in the UK, we have a forest called Nottingham Forest, which obviously is Robin Hood fame, which is supposed to be fairly old. But I've walked around the place and thinking, these trees don't seem to be that old, do they? You can look at the ring, count the rings and the ones that have been cut down and broken and what have you, and you think, there's something very odd here.
It's funny you say that, because I've had people try to tell me, but JLB, we know history goes back further because of the tree rings. And this is called dendrochronology. Okay, dendrochronology is the field of study that supposedly can take the rings of trees and then match one set of rings with another set of rings, and using this process basically trace back through history using the tree rings. Okay, it's called dendrochronology. And so I've had people try and tell me, JLB, we know how far back things go because of the tree rings. And my response to them is, have you ever looked into dendrochronology for yourself? And not a single one of them have. I'm wondering if anyone actually has done this. Because if you look into dendrochronology, if you're currently a believer that you can somehow use this so-called science to trace back through history, that's fine. Go and look into dendrochronology for yourself and come back and tell me with a straight face that you believe that this is a serious science. It's a complete joke, in my opinion. So it's funny you bring up the tree rings, because that's actually one of the arguments that people try and give me that history is real. Is tree rings, man. That's the world that we live in today. I'm saying to people, listen, go and look at your textbooks and find out what they say about Herodotus or about Caesar. Just go and do it, and go and trace their sources, okay? Just go and do this. They won't do it. They come to me and they say, but JLB, we've got the tree rings. That's the absolute state of people today.
It's fantastic, isn't it? It kind of works against them, because the ones I've looked at, so I'm counting like, there's 50. There's 50 in that one. A ring for you. That's what they say in these trees.
I'm telling you, man, I still remember when I went and looked into dendrochronology for myself. I remember where I was sitting. I set aside some time to go and do the research, go and learn what's the official story of this so-called science. And I was very open-minded, and I remember sitting there. I remember where I was too, reading through the official story of dendrochronology. And you know that sort of feeling you get where you can kind of see where it's all going? And you're like, no, it can't be this obvious, can it? Yeah, it can. It's a joke. But no one checks this stuff, man. That's the amazing thing. People will not check this stuff. I think if you could go around the entire ACT realm, the entire conspiracy culture, let's say there's a few thousand people here, I'm pretty confident only a couple dozen of us have gone and checked the sources for this stuff. And you're one of them. You took a trip out to Tucson, you looked into the Viking history, and the 1700s. So enough from me. The way that these segments usually work, we go around the panel and everybody asks you a question or two. So let's go to Mezzy, and then we'll go to JJ. Mezzy, any questions for the latest addition to johnthebond.com? Take no notice from the Midlands of Britain.
Well, that was a great introduction. Thank you, Take No Notice. I do have one question regarding David Icke, because he covers a hell of a lot of subjects. And I want to know if you can talk about one which just didn't connect with you.
Well, I assume you're going to think I'm going to say the lizards, but actually I'm not. And maybe at some point in the future I might give the reason to that once I'm a bit more familiar with everybody on this site. But that aside, the thing that doesn't connect to me, or doesn't connect the most to me, is his conclusions at the end. Is that he essentially ends his whole shebang, his whole show, with peace and love, and we need to all sit down and love everybody and love everything, and everything will be fine. Well, while I don't hold to the fact that there's some evil entities out there that are causing harm to us, I think that's not the way a reasoning, thinking person should really face problems, and society problems for sure. It should be more like, let's work together and figure this stuff out and get it sorted one thing at a time. So Mr. Ike completely lost my faith when he said just sit there and love everybody like some new age guru. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, great answer. Exactly what I was looking for. Thank you.
Well, come on, Mezzy. There's only a couple of us on the panel, so let's all ask the newbie a couple of questions. Give us something else. Take no notice of something else to try and come back with.
Oh, I don't really have anything else. I was just wondering what one thing that, because David Icke covers just so many subjects, it's not funny. I've listened to him before. But no, it was a good answer. I don't have any other questions.
Have you ever gone to a David Icke convention, Mezzy?
Oh, no.
Because apparently they're like 6 or 7 hours long or something. Is that true? Take no notice? They're like an entire day thing?
It is, yes. I actually religiously read every book that came out from David Icke, and also listened to a number of his videos, his DVDs, that he released. And it was a bit of, should we say, a bit of a target for me to actually go and see David Icke in concert. So in 2016, even though I was well beyond anything he was really doing now, I had the opportunity. So I went to Manchester and went to see him, and sat there through hours and hours and hours of it. And to be honest, at the end of it, what I came away with is that his son is a fantastic musician. He plays in between and every break, and I thoroughly enjoyed his son's music, but was a little miffed at David Icke, to be honest. I think it's purely he's just a commercial entity now, to be honest, and he's just using his work to make himself a lot of money, and that's it.
It might be hard for you to remember, but if you can remember, what kind of audience did he attract? Like, what would be the typical demographic at a David Icke convention? Do you remember, or is it kind of too long ago to...
It was quite mixed, to be fair. There were young and old. There was certainly an awful lot of what I'd call hippie-looking people in the audience with, transfers and things on their coats, and I mean, just to give you an idea, I'm a businessman normally, so my normal every day is wearing a suit when I go to work. So I'm pretty do like to look after myself. So what I did notice is that there's quite a lot of shabby people in the audience. You can say maybe I'm a bit stuck up, but there you go. If that gives you any idea.
It does give me some idea, and in defense of the people who are dressed shabbily, I usually am as well, so I can't very well sit here and judge them. I'm still wearing t-shirts from 10 years ago, man. I live a very minimalist... In fact, my opinion of David Icke's audience has just gone up based on what you've just told me. So, good on him.
That's great.
No, you're a businessman. You've got to dress up. That's fair enough. So let's go to JJ. Obviously, we haven't done the Ask a Newbie for you yet, JJ, but the way that these things happen, it looks like you get to ask questions before you've been asked. So take a couple of minutes. I'll put myself on mute and ask some questions of our latest addition to the website.
Well, to start, I am a shabby dresser as well, wearing clothes from over 10 years ago. So I fit into that demographic also, and good on them. A good question I would have, I guess, is since you have looked into the Viking cultures and whatnot, a big part of my family, a big story that I've been told growing up is that I'm related to Eric the Red, discoverer of Greenland, supposedly, and have you heard anything about him in your research, or have you looked into anything along those lines?
I've actually not come across. Is it say Eric with a red?
Eric the Red is, yeah, I haven't actually looked into him a ton myself, but supposedly, yeah, he started Greenland as a country. He was one of the discoverers of that, and
Okay, so the same. My work that I did was actually on the actual religious texts. So
I see.
their belief system was what it is. So I followed that back to the 1795. The actual work is still ongoing with verifying where the Viking raids and the actual people themselves, or the sources for them. But yeah, I don't know if obviously you've noticed that the actual amount of material with the Vikings is absolutely incredible now. There is absolutely there's probably more text to do with Vikings and TV programs and movies and everything than with the Bible now, to be honest.
Yeah, it does seem to be something that has really grown over the years rather than just being something that happened a long time ago that we're just learning about now. It just seems to more and more and more keeps coming out. It's interesting to follow. So I was wondering about that. But yeah, I have seen some of those shows myself, like the Vikings show and some of those other lines of thinking that seem to be in the mainstream media. So yeah, I was wondering what your thoughts on that were. I guess I'm not sure what other questions I would have besides that.
No, that's cool. That's plenty. So I think we've got a good idea of who you are, Technonosis. I think this has been a really good introduction, and you've only been on the website for a few weeks, haven't you? So it might be a bit difficult to give like an overall view, but so far, based on the time that you've been here at johnthebond.com, what are some of the topics that you would say that if you had to pick some to disagree with, maybe you disagree with my take on a topic, or you disagree with some of the perspectives that other people offer, is there anything on the site that at the moment you're kind of like, oh, that's too far for me, or I disagree with that perspective? If you had to pick something to disagree with, what would it be?
There is only one thing I kind of disagree with on this site. Really, is while I am not a flat earther, I have a lot of contact with them, and I think the general feeling the feeling that I got is that flat earthers are retards, kind of impression coming from everything I've listened to, and for myself, actually meeting with a lot of people, for me they're very open, and while they might be wrong, or in the wrong, completely the wrong ballpark altogether on the shape of the earth, as everybody is. Yeah, I don't kind of, that doesn't hold with me. I think just the fact that people are questioning, for me, is good, and that's something we need more of from everybody everywhere.
Yeah, we should give some context there, because you're in Britain and you have told me previously that in your experience there's lots of real life conventions or get-togethers in Britain to do with flat earth. So you've met a lot of flat earthers in real life, whereas most of the flat earthers that I've met have been the online ones. Like, I've met them online. So you've got a very different experience with the flat earth to what I do. Mine is online, and so a lot of my opinions are shaped by some of the cretins in the so-called flat earth movement online, whereas you've met real people, and from what you've told me, a lot of them are actually nice, friendly people, basically.
That's right, yes. And the variety of topics that I've discussed with them over the last 12 months, say, it's quite an eye-opener. So certainly a lot of topics, even touching on history as well. But things like, the transvestigations and things like this, it's just everything really. It's an eye-opener.
And how many of these flat earth real-life get-togethers have you been to?
Well, there's a regular one which I go to once a month, which is the last Sunday of every month, without fail. And this particular group holds sometimes interim meetings, But in the summer as well, I also the some of the actual content producers or whatever you want to call them, they actually might hold some meetings themselves or organise meetings. So I might track to one of theirs.
The last Sunday of every month you go to without fail. So that would have been last weekend.
It was, yes.
Wow. Can you give us like a brief sort of overview of how these meetings go and like maybe some of the people you met?
Well, what I didn't tell you before, which is quite interesting. I mean, the one last time, this last Sunday, so there was about 13 people besides myself who turned up, and we all sat in it was in a pub, this one. We all sat round in a pub, all discussing different topics. It's kind of split the table in half. So there's discussion down my side of the table was rather different to the discussion that was the other end of the table. So while the other end of the table seemed to be repeating flat Earth proofs, my side of the table, I must take that. I was responsible for guiding a lot of the conversation, but obviously we went into things like the jet engines and electricity and where it's generated, and history and the war hoax as well. So also
the war hoax. So you were broaching the war hoax with these people at this Flat Earth meetup.
Yes.
How did that go down? How did they respond to?
The guys who were sitting right with me were very open to it, and it's great. As I say, that there was what actually sparked that off was that there was actually a Royal Marine in the bar, and we got chatting up the bar waiting for a drink, and I asked him a few questions. So that then ported over onto the table when I got back to the table with my drinks. Because obviously,
so there's a dude at the bar wearing a beret.
No,
and you walk up to him and say, "Hey."
We just got into a conversation, and I asked him, what did you do for, what's your job as such? And he says, well, he's actually an ex Royal Marine, so obviously he likes impressing people with what he used to do. And I actually asked him, sorry, he's actually an ex Royal Marine sniper. So I actually asked him if he'd actually killed anybody, and he said no. And the questions went on from there.
Did he sort of look a bit defensive about that? Like when you said to him, so your job is to shoot people from long distances. Have you ever actually shot someone? Was there like a few seconds of...
He was actually a very relaxed type person, to be honest. So I did expect a bit of a crack, but I didn't get one at all. No, he was very, very open, absolutely open about the fact that he'd been on different tours to Afghanistan and Iraq, and he hadn't, he'd never even seen an enemy, let alone shot at one. He hadn't even aimed, he hadn't aimed at one. He hadn't seen one. He'd not done anything. It was all rather fitted in nicely with what's been said. So.
Well, can you imagine if this is the first podcast from johnthebond.com that someone's listened to? Just with this introduction of you here, Take No Notice, people have been exposed to the history hoax and the war hoax, and even subtle intimations that you're open to reptilian people. This would be a bit of a mind bender, wouldn't it?
It's all very interesting, eh?
Well, part 2 is going to be a lot of fun, but we need to move on and introduce JJ as well. So Take No Notice, just wrap up the introduction for yourself. Any final thoughts before we move on to saying hello to JJ?
Yeah, I'd just like to say it's a pleasure. It really is to find people that in a lonely world that seem to have very like minds, and that is to me it's fantastic that the opportunity to be able to bounce ideas off each other, and even maybe aid John Le Bon with his work would be, it's very good. So thank you.
Well, based on what you've been saying, I'm tempted to say forget Thailand, forget Mexico. I should make my first destination Britain and come and hang out at one of these flat Earth meetups. You know what I mean? Try and put the past behind us with the flat earthers. There's been some animosity in the past. Some of the flat earthers really didn't like me because I'm, of course, the world's leading flat earth skeptic. Everybody knows that. But maybe we can put all of that behind us and maybe build some bridges. You know what I mean? I'm very tempted. So anyway, make sure you stick around. We need to say hello to JJ from the Midwest of the United States. So JJ, same idea. Tell us whatever you want to tell us about when you first got into conspiracy culture, how you first found this website, some of the topics that you got into earlier on, your favorite topics, topics that you don't like, anything at all, man. Take a few minutes. I'll put myself on mute and introduce yourself to johnthebond.com.
Yeah, my name's JJ. I guess one of the first big things that really got me started down the path of kind of questioning the mainstream was just that throughout my whole childhood, I was told that I needed to take these pills in order to control my brain. I was on Adderall and Ritalin and was told that I had ADHD and that I was out of control and that there was no way to handle that other than by taking these pills. And so I took those for 15 plus years, all throughout schooling. And anytime that I couldn't, or anytime that I forgot to take those, I basically felt useless. I told myself that I was useless because I had been told that without those, I couldn't do much of anything. So that was a big thing when I got out of high school, and I decided that I wasn't willing to do that anymore. I didn't want to take a medication every day to start the day and in the middle of the day. And so I started to decide that I wanted to be able to control my mind on my own. And so going from there, I kind of spiraled downwards into fast food and not being able to control my appetite, because a big part of those medications is that they suppress your appetite. So that was a very big struggle for me for many years. Right now, I'm kind of coming out the back end of that. But bigger than that, I suppose I would say in the actual conspiracy realm, if you can call it that, I would say Graham Hancock and his interview with Joe Rogan was a big eye-opener to questioning the story overall as to what history is and what our history as humans is. While I don't necessarily think that his may be the truth or the real story, it did get me to begin to start to see that maybe the story that I was being told wasn't what it actually is. So I took that and kind of ran with it, and from there I ended up recently at the Higher Side Chats, which connected me up with johnthebond.com through his interview. And after listening in on the plus portion of that interview, I heard the Nikola Tesla part, and that is someone that had resonated with me quite a bit throughout my life, that I thought he was a very inspirational person, and the thought that maybe he could be a fictional character was a big thing for me. So I decided to go ahead and look into that further and go over to your actual website. And from there, it's been one eye opener / mind blowing experience after the other. And there's so much to see and so much to question, so much to know. So that's really where the journey is for me. I want to be able to be the best person I can be and be able to affect my bubble of influence the best I can and improve the world in whatever way I can. So I guess that would be my introduction.
That is a terrific introduction as well. How good is this, guys? We've had no newbies for like 4 or 5 weeks, and then all of a sudden we get 2 out of nowhere, and they've both made terrific starts. This is great. So you started off with a negative experience with the medical industrial complex, and then maybe a negative experience with food, which a lot of people have either suffered with in the past or are suffering with today. Then Graham Hancock on Joe Rogan, and I used to be a Joe Rogan hater, and I'm kind of embarrassed about that. These days I just accept Rogan for who he is, and your evidence of how his interviews, even with people who might not be necessarily giving good information, it can get people to think for themselves or to want to go and explore things. Then you found THC, Greg Carwood, at the Higher Side Chats. And then when you heard me questioning the Tesla story, rather than getting triggered, you went and looked into it further. And fast forward a few weeks and here you are at johnthebond.com.
Yeah, pretty much. That's the story.
That is sensational. How long have you been listening to the Higher Side Chats?
It has actually only been probably 3 weeks now at most, I would say.
Oh, so you weren't a member before my chat with Greg Carwood. You weren't a listener before my chat. It's all kind of relatively new for you.
No, I actually, yeah, just recently found out about it and had been listening through, and yours was one of the ones that had resonated with me a lot more, really.
When did you first start listening to Joe Rogan?
Joe Rogan was more of a situational based listening, really, because I had been told, I can't remember who exactly told me, but someone had said that Graham Hancock was on there, and then it was a pretty interesting line of thinking that no one had really brought up before. So most of the people that I had checked out on there were references based on some of the friends that I've had.
Well, a lot of people are fans of Rogan. There's an overlap between the Rogan audience and UFC fans. Are you a mixed martial arts fan, or is that not one of your reasons for listening to Rogan?
It's not. I have actually taken mixed martial arts class in the past, but that wasn't really I've never really been into UFC or any kind of organized sports organizations.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, UFC 230 is on later today, so I'm kind of looking forward to that. And I'm happy to admit, I'm still like 15 to 20% normie, and I still have my normie interests, and sports ball and that kind of thing is one of them. Well, I've got tons of questions for you, but first let's go around the round table and get some other questions. Let's go to Mezzy. Any questions for JJ, the latest addition to johnlebon.com?
Hi, JJ. Welcome to the site. Look, how old were you when you first got medicated?
I was very young. See, I was actually hospitalized for a little bit as a child due to anger issues, I suppose it was, and I think it was probably when I was in elementary school. We're very early on in that time, so
So that would be a elementary school is
that would be probably about 6 to 8 years old. So
that's terrible. So you would have been locked into the medications by your parents, right? Because they were looking after your health. Have you spoken to them at all about this and why they would have medicated you?
I haven't had a big full-on conversation about my negative feelings towards the subject, but I have brought it up in passing here and there. It was basically they felt that they didn't know how to control me, and that my mom herself has said that she feared what I could do to my therapist when I was a kid, and that she just was afraid of my temper and my hyperactivity and didn't feel that I could do well in school without it, I suppose.
Right. What did you think? I mean, I don't know if you know what you thought at the time, but what did you think at the time, if you can say, um, while you were medicated? Because you obviously had some issues, and medication always isn't the answer. But so, what kind of things did you do that warranted this medication?
There were some good examples, I would suppose. Well, the reason that I ended up being sent to the hospital for a week or so was that I had a certain fascination with knives, I suppose, when I was younger. Not that I wanted to hurt anybody or that I felt that I was in that kind of state of mind, but just thought that they were cool, I suppose. So they found one that I had hidden under my bed, and then from there, it pretty much went to a very fear-based state of mind, I suppose, on their part as to what my thoughts were with that. And
So fascination with knives and what you do with knives, two different things. You didn't actually do anything with them. You just like the look of knives, right?
yeah, like for example, I would go to a pawn shop and be interested in like a cane sword or something like that, just stuff that I had seen in shows and movies. It wasn't sort of like a violent fascination with it. It was more just oh, that's what cool people have. Like that was just something I believed when I was a kid, I suppose.
Wow, interesting. Well, thanks. Wow, I can't imagine how it would have been to be medicated. You know, That would have been terrible. But anyway, thank you very much. Welcome to the site.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was very odd. On the days when I didn't take it, I felt as if I was less of a person. Like I couldn't communicate it as well. I couldn't focus on any of my work. I felt like it was very a backwards way of thinking, to be able to, when it could have been just based on my diet, since I was being fed fast food. And we have this big thing here in America called the Schwann's man, who delivers food to your house on a weekly basis, and most of it's like bagel dogs, like hot dogs wrapped in bagels filled with cheese and butter and garlic cheese toast and all these things. And what we're learning nowadays about how the gut can play a pretty big role in every part of your life. That could have been a big issue with what was going on with me, but that wasn't something that was looked into.
Yeah, definitely. Diet has a huge influence on how you grow up. So your mother didn't cook?
She did. Well, my stepdad cooked. He was working in a hotel kitchen, and he would prepare meals on basically like a meal prepping. He would make like a bunch of steaks for the week or whatnot, but it wasn't very regular, I suppose, and it wasn't always the best stuff. He would use the cheaper ingredients like Velveeta cheese and all the processed foods, so still not a great diet. And then with my anger issues, they didn't want to turn me down from having fast food when I wanted it, and whatnot. So, and I had divorced parents when I was growing up, and on my dad's side, they were much more willing to feed me junk food regularly. And at my mom's side, she was always on whatever diet was popular at the time, so she tried a little harder, but not very hard.
It's terrific that you're off the medication now and a normal person, right?
Yeah, try. Normal's relative,
Thanks. Back to you, John.
All right, so I've still got heaps of questions, but I'll save them. Let's first go to Take No Notice. Your introductory questions for JJ, the latest addition to johnlebon.com.
Hi, JJ. You mentioned Graham Hancock, and obviously that's a very well-known author who presents quite a lot of theories about ancient cultures in the past, and that like history goes back to some golden time and what have you. But now that you've come to JLB's website, it's certainly clear to me that Graham Hancock has spent probably thousands and thousands of hours around places, the Giza Plateau, and from his photographs gets special access and gets to poke and tread where other people aren't allowed to. So would, in your mind now, after being exposed to JLB stuff, would you think that maybe Graham Hancock would actually know that the Giza Plateau and the pyramids is one big theme park?
Yeah, that's a great question, really. There's been multiple stories that I've seen him say where he's actually bribed the guards at the Giza Plateau to be able to climb the pyramid at night. And yeah, that would definitely be a possibility for sure. I mean, it's that's one thing that has always kind of struck me with him, is that he has traveled to all these different areas. He's been to South America. He's been all over Africa, it seems like. He's been through Egypt multiple times. He's claimed that he's had probably over 80 ayahuasca trips in his lifetime. And yeah, I feel like if anybody knew about that with how big he is, that would be something that he would know now. And I hate to say it, but he is making probably a good amount of money from his books, so it's definitely a potentiality.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? I can't find it hard to reconcile, to be honest, because if him more than anybody would probably be walking around the back of the pyramids in South America and seeing that they're just hills with a few bits of stone strapped on the front to make them look like pyramids. So he's spreading he's still spreading the myths, as it were. So that's obviously my first thought. And how much have you read a lot of Hancock's work?
I have read his Fingerprints of the Gods and Magicians of the Gods books that are kind of his overlay for the ideas into an ancient culture that perhaps predates ours, and how he believes that our humanity basically is a species with amnesia, whereas we don't remember our past, which I would say would be John LeBon's view too, almost, but in a different way. Because if history is fake, then we don't remember the real history. But yeah, that is a big thing, and I don't know. It's something that I feel like even if he doesn't know the truth, maybe it's something that he's been looking into so hard for so long that it's something that he is seeing any bit of evidence as fitting into his own state of mind or his own views. I don't know. It's hard to know.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think it's amazing when you come across these opposing things.
That was a really good point I felt you made about the paint in Egypt. That how would that even begin to last that amount of time?
Well, this is it, and this kind of thing again. Surely, Mr. Graham Hancock, should notice that all these shiny. They've been hanging around in these chambers for thousands of years, but it's amusing to me now. It really is. So my other question. Sorry, my other question to you is: you said you came to JLB through the Greg Carwood's side chats. So, and you said that was what, 3 weeks ago, something like that.
Yeah, maybe a month tops.
So how many other guests did you listen to, and what was it that took you into JLB rather than any of the other guests?
Well, that's a good question too. Yeah, I've been going backwards through his. I felt really good about his methods as an interviewer, and the fact that he seems to have some patience and is able to allow people their time to speak and to get their views across. But basically, I've been going back, and I'm in the middle of 2017 right now, or maybe at the start of going back through that. And I guess not many of them have resonated with me as much. There's been a lot that have been based around magic, and that's something that I haven't been able to research much throughout my life. A lot with Gordon White and Tracy Twyman talking about. Well, I looked into her website, and she has a lot of different occultist books looking into the past of the Templars and stuff like that. And those are things that I really haven't been able to look into. But the 9/11 is a big thing that John talks about, and that's something that I've questioned for a long time. And then the Nikola Tesla thing really hooked me, and when I first heard Graham Hancock's story, a big part of it was, for me at least, that I had been down for a long time before that on myself and hadn't really had many positive thoughts in general. But based on that story, I felt that, well, if there's an ancient culture that is amazing and, has all this crazy technology and whatnot, then wow, we must have such a really great history. And that was kind of like a spurring thing, it's a story to kind of buy into and hide behind. But I don't know per se, I guess, what exactly drew me to him more, but the things that he had to say, and maybe his voice in particular, really drew me in, and I felt that he was very articulate in the ways that he put across what he was saying. And then when I had gotten to his website and had been looking into the primary source research methodology and had been looking into his thoughts on how thoughts and arguments should be being put forward, these really resonated well with me because that's something that I've felt that I've had trouble with in my past. So I hope that's a good answer.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Well, terrific questions, terrific answers. This is fantastic. We've taken up the entire first hour with the introductions, and I'm very happy about that. So we'll have to save the topics for part 2. But I've got a couple of questions for you there, JJ. So in this conspiracy culture, there's a lot of people who are a bit pessimistic about the future, or they're constantly focusing on the negatives, or, spending a lot of their time consuming material that is, I would say, not very uplifting. Have you noticed this in your time here? And what's your view on the future? Do you think you've got a positive sort of attitude towards the future? Have you thought much through this? What's your take on the world today and where it's headed?
That's actually a really good question because that's something I've been putting a lot of thought into today in particular. I was doing a lot of thought into your ideas on the placebo and nocebo effects and how having these sort of, well, this was all from sort of the higher intelligence chat, I suppose, that I started thinking about this. So thank you again for that. But I have been thinking about a lot as to whether these ideas that are being put out that are so negative really are detrimental. Because at this point in my life, I am currently in, I would say, one of the better positions I've ever been in with the job that I have, the relationship that I have, and the living accommodations that I have. And yet I still have this overbearing negativity that seems to be weighing down on me. And I do see that a lot in the culture. And I do see that a lot with for instance, the crop, or not the crop dusting, but, uh, the lines from the planes and thinking that the overall people in charge are evil and not really realizing that each thing has a duality in itself. Like there are going to be good and bad things to each person and each organization. And yeah.
Okay, so you brought up the nocebo concept. I'm so glad that you did. Can you explain to people who might not be familiar with this? What is the concept of nocebo? And in your mind, why is this important?
Well, basically, how I perceived it was that along the lines of how a placebo is you believing in your mind or your body that you're going to receive a positive effect from either a drug or a routine or a ritual, that it will have a positive effect on you based on your feelings of it. And then the inverse being true, that if you believe that something is going to kill you, or that you are breathing in poison, or that you are being hunted down by these evil elites, that is going to be something that is always weighing down on you, that will have a physical effect on you in a negative way.
Exactly. So this is something that I have observed in the ACT realm, as I call it, alternative conspiracy truth realm, the ACT realm, conspiracy culture in general. This constant repetition of ideas like, oh, they're spraying us, or they're poisoning us, or they want to kill us, or they're spying on us to do nefarious things. All these ideas that are constantly reinforced. Anybody who understands the power of placebo, the power of mind over matter, the idea of our beliefs shaping outcomes physically, that is, if we think that these pills are going to help us, we're going to feel better. But it's just a sugar pill. How does this work? We call this placebo. If you understand that concept, then it shouldn't be too hard to understand the inverse of that, which is what we call nocebo. So if people are out there constantly listening to people tell them, there's an enemy out there, they're attacking you, they're trying to kill you, they hate you, they're spraying you, they're all this stuff, if people are constantly having that going into their brains through podcasts or through YouTube videos or through blogs, what effect do you think that has on their psyche? And it seems to me as though the broader conspiracy culture, it seems to attract people with a somewhat negative disposition, which is fair enough. From time to time in life, we'll have periods where we feel a bit down. That's very natural. But it'll attract people with that mindset, and then it will reinforce in their minds this idea that you're a victim, you've got all these enemies. And it seems to me that this is having a potentially deleterious effect on the lives of these people who are well-meaning. I mean, most people in the ACT realm, they're well-meaning people. And yet they're surrounded by these negative thoughts. And it seems to me as though, yeah, a lot of them, their lives are being negatively impacted in a direct way through the concept of nocebo. So I'm so glad you brought that up, man. So you're saying that at this point in your life, you're feeling a bit better about how things are going than maybe in the past?
Yeah, I'm still working my way through it, but yeah, I do definitely feel like that is a real thing. When you're constantly telling yourself that you're not as worth it or as great as other people around you or any other kind of way, then that becomes true to you. And that has definitely been a theme in my life that I'm trying to escape.
Excellent. Yeah, look, my website is anyone can join and anyone can join in as long as they're polite and civil, and there's no beliefs that people can have or can't have. It's pretty much what you might call a broad church in that sense. But going forward, I'm going to do my best to dissuade victim mentality people from joining because I don't want to be around them. And I'm going to do my best to encourage winner mentality people, proactive people, people with a positive attitude towards life. Those are the kinds of people I want to be around. And I've experienced this idea of when you have negative thoughts and you listen to people with negative thoughts, bad things seem to happen. But if you have positive thoughts and you surround yourself with positive people, good things seem to happen. And anyone who hears me say that and they come back and they say, oh, JLB, you shouldn't be positive, that person, I want nothing to do with them because they're trying to drag me down like crabs in a bucket. And sadly, the act realm is just full of crabs in a bucket who don't actually want the people around them to be happy. And this might sound crazy when you hear me say this, but I can document this. I have documented this. People who will support you when you say the world is bad, then when you turn around and say, well, actually, maybe there's some pretty cool things about this world, they try and drag you down. And it's not because they're evil or nefarious. This is just the frame of mind that they're in. And after years and years of constant reinforcement of negative thoughts, a lot of these people, I don't think they'll ever get out of it. But guys, this has been a fantastic introduction. Thank you to Take No Notice. Thank you to JJ as well. What we're going to do is we're going to wrap up this part of the call and then come back for the topics in part 2. But before we do, JJ, give us your final thoughts. This is your introduction to the website, so take a couple of minutes. Give us your final thoughts for your introduction to johnlebon.com.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say I am really happy to be here. I also am very excited to have found a group that has some like-minded people. It's very difficult to be able to even discuss these thoughts or be able to delve into these ideas at all with anyone that I meet on a daily basis in my daily jobs. And it's actually been crazy because I work for my local school district to kind of learn about the dumbing down of school and being able to see that on a daily basis in the rituals that they commit these students into doing, like reciting nonsensical pledges of allegiance, and just it's a lot of craziness to watch on a daily basis. And so yeah, I'm excited to keep learning. I'm excited to speak with some open-minded people along with myself, and there's a lot to know, I feel like, and I'm excited to see it.
Well, it's great to have you on board. Can you guys imagine how cool this is for me after years and years of writing these articles and doing the research and trying to put the ideas out there? Just in this call, I've had a guy from the Midlands of the UK tell me that he's taken a trip to Tucson. He tried to trace the sources of the Vikings, and he got the same result that I always get, which is the 1700s. And then I've chatted with a guy in the Midwest of the US who is bringing up concepts like Nocebo and these sorts of things, and the dumbing down, the John Taylor Gatto dumbing down of America that he's seeing with his own eyes, and all of these things that I've been that I think are very important, and so few people seem to be paying attention to. I've now got people saying that they're on board, they get it. This is how do you put this? I'm humbled. This is a humbling experience. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back for part 2 in a moment. We've got to wrap up part 1. So big thanks to Mezzy, to JJ, and to Take No Notice. In part 2 of this call, we're going to talk about truth in the movies, lies in the news. What are some of the films that seem to have a lot of truth in there for some reason? And why is that truth in there? Why is that? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the programming of the masses and the 1984 style Orwellian conditioning of the children. And we'll also talk first about black pills, because of course that is a topic that was chosen by Take No Notice when he won our trivia. So we've got a lot to talk about. We will see you for part 2 if you're a member of johnlebon.com, which of course for the next 2 weeks costs only a cup of coffee per week. So for 1 cup of coffee per week, you get to hang out with people who are open-minded, can have a civil discussion, can have civil disagreements. Some people believe in flat earth, some people are flat earth skeptics like myself, some people believe in the war hoax, some people are open-minded to reptilian theory. There's all kinds of people here. Nice casual conversation. Everyone's welcome as long as they're civil, and you can be part of it for just 1 cup of coffee per week for the next 2 weeks, because in a couple of weeks the prices go up, baby, so get on board before then, and you'll get to enjoy all the perks of being a member of johnlebon.com. So if you are a member, we'll see you for part 2, but if you're not, then what are you doing with that cash that's more important than joining johnthebond.com?